Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us for what will be an incredible four-part series, Designing Inclusive Preschools, Discover, Data, Design, Deliver, presented by author and educator Andratesha Fritzgerald. I'm Kristen Brooks, Executive Director with the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project, and on behalf of Co-Director Kevin Schaefer, our team out of both Riverside and El Dorado counties and the California Department of Education, we are glad you are here to engage with us. We have many participants on the line with us who can participate using chat and Q&A, where we have team members monitoring throughout today's session. And if you miss any portion of this session or future sessions, you will also receive a link to the recording and related resources in a follow-up email to your address that you provided when you registered. Please be sure to check your junk or spam folders if you don't see the email come through in the next 24 hours. Your presenter today, the incredible Andratesha Fritzgerald, serves as Director of Teaching, Learning, and Innovation for the East Cleveland City School Districts and has been a teacher and leader in urban schools for nearly 20 years. She has graciously engaged with us in this important work of equity and inclusion for our youngest learners. What she will share today over the next few sessions will be inspiring and a motivating call to action for innovation, as well as validation of what you are already improving upon for your students, staff, families, and communities. With that, here is your presenter, Andratesha Fritzgerald.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Kristen, for the introduction. Thank you to Janelle and Juliet for all of your help, and a great big thank you to Kevin as well. And so it is my pleasure to be with you today to discuss designing inclusive preschools. And session one is all about discovering our story in data. And that's going to make more sense to you as this lesson or this session unfolds. But before we get started, go ahead and type in the chat, what is your role in the district where you work or in the organization? So type where you are viewing from and maybe what your role is. So let's see who we have on today. Lots of educators coming in. We've got principals, coordinators, OT, teachers, administrators, SLPs. From all over Cali. We have Pennsylvania in the house. Hi, Mary, how you doing? Preschool administrators, all kind, executive directors, and we welcome you today. You're in the right place. I always like to begin my sessions by saying that 100% of who you are is welcome in this space today. What you know is welcome. What you don't know is welcome. What you struggle with and what you're a total rock star at is welcome. And so as we discuss together designing inclusive preschools and discovering our story in data, there will be things that you know well, things that may be new to you. And on this journey, there is room for all of us as we progress together. So my name is Andratesha Fritzgerald, and I've worked in education for a little bit. This is year number 20 for me. And so as a learner, as one who is growing right alongside you, I am so excited to hear from you, to interact with you, and to build together. So here are our goals for today. We'll walk through some key data points. We will examine the connection between early segregation and post-secondary outcomes. We'll reflect on the impact of honor and power, and then identify practices to disrupt perpetuating educational injustice. So yes, there are some heavy words here. We will look at this through the lens of designing inclusive preschools. And I would like you to, if you're using the interactive slides through the link on the Padlet, or if you are using just the chat to interact, there are multiple ways for your voice to be heard. And so I would like you to just tell me which session goal resonates most with what you want to get out of this session. 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you can either pop that into the interactive slides, or you can place it right in the chat. So we've got 4 and 2. And what I'll do is slide on over to the interactive slides to see how many of you are there. We've got about 8 of you there. So getting some responses coming in there as well. So thank you for that. Also, if you would like to utilize closed captions, you can click on the CC at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, and you'll be able to see those. So thank you all for sharing your goals. This helps me to know where each of you is hoping to spend your time or to take away today. And that helps me to get to know you better as an audience. Even if we're in webinar format, I'm trying to get as much feedback about who you are and what's important to you as possible. So we have 4 stops on our journey today. And I think of this kind of like a bus trip almost. Stop 1 is a data picture or data pictures. Stop 2, data pain. Stop 3 is data power. And stop 4 is data honor. And if you look in the chat, the Padlet for today and some additional resources is available there for you. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. I've been in education for, like I said, 20 years, and I wrote a book, Anti-Racism and Universal Design for Learning. Our next session will dive into the intersection of anti-racism and UDL and how it plays into building inclusive preschools. This book has a foreword that was written by Samaria Rice, who was the mother of Tamir Rice. He was a 12-year-old young man who was gunned down by police. And so the work of justice takes on such a different meaning when you lose one that you love. And Samaria Rice took her tragedy and turned it into triumph by sharing with others what needs to be done in order for schools to be welcoming and inclusive for all children. And so she joined with me and shared her voice as the writer of the foreword to that book through CAST. And so one of the quotes from that book is that you learn so much more when you're free to express your learning in a way that makes sense and is not contrary to who you are. And so I want to invite you to share who you are in a way that makes sense. And so if writing notes is for you, then please do that to capture your learning. If you need to stand or sit, then make the space that you need to be well while you're taking in this learning. I want you to be who you are and learn at the same time. And so for many of our learners, whether it's learners with disabilities, learners of color, there's a sense that they have to change who they are to become the picture of success. And I want to disrupt that pattern, even by creating professional development sessions where you are free to express your learning and take in your learning in ways. So you have choices on how you do that. On the interactive slides, you can move forward or back at your pace. You can type, you can draw on some slides, but hopefully there is some way that you can be you and still interact with this learning. So I want you to pause and reflect as we think about that. There's a picture of a mirror on the screen and some questions for you to reflect on. If you're using the interactive slides, you can type your answer there, but I would like you to choose one of those questions. Take about 1 minute to just pause and reflect. And many times in education, we don't get to think about ourselves. I want you to be selfish for a moment and not think about anyone else. I want you to think about you. What do you need? What do you want? Who are you? And so I want you to pause and reflect. Who are you? Who are you as a learner? What do you need as a learner? I want you to pick one of those 3 questions to just pause and think about for 1 minute. You can type your answers in the chat, or you can put it on the interactive slide, or you can just think about it for yourself. So take about 1 minute just to choose a question and think about you. Go. About 30 seconds. Take about 5 seconds to finish up. Thank you all for introducing me to you as a learner. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So many of you said that you need the visuals, and there are going to be visual metaphors that go along that I'll always describe just in case auditory is your main way to take learning in. please use the closed captions, and you will have those interactive slides that you can move forward and back. And at the bottom of the slides, if you notice on this one, if you see that little symbol at the bottom, you'll be able to write or draw or drag and drop. And so whether you're visual, whether you need manipulatives or something to move around, I've tried to design with you in mind. And the better I get to know you, the better I can design for you. So thank you for sharing a little bit about who you are as a learner. And so next, I'm going to give you an invitation to personalize your learning environment. And so you'll see that there are 2 dots at the bottom of your screen. And this is for those of you who are tactile. Even in a virtual environment, there are some things that you can move around and drop and drag. And so if you learn in a variety of ways, we'll give you many opportunities. But this is your invitation to personalize your learning environment. On the left is a picture that is gray, and you can see just foggy contrast, pretty much. If that was a representation of focus, that would be a 0. You can't really make out the different shapes. You can't tell what is in the picture. You can just see contrast. So as far as ready for learning, ready for focus, that would be a 0. If you move all the way to the right, there's a picture that is fully in focus. You can see the blue sky and different clouds. You can see different shades of green and different trees. You can even see different shades of green in the grass that is in the picture. And that would be fully focused and ready to learn. That's a 5. I want you to take that red dot, and what number would represent how ready for learning you are? Judgment-free, 0 to 5. How focused are you for learning? You can either move the red dot or type your number in the chat, 0 to 5. How focused are you? How ready for learning are you? Go. Okay, we got some 5s, some 4s, some 3s. You can move that red dot if you're in the interactive slides to just where you feel like you are. And I'll just pop over just to see if I can check in on you. All right, we've got about 74 people over there, and you can see we're all over. So as a class, we're all in different places, and that is perfectly fine. And so in the chat, we have 3s, 5s, we have 4s. What I would like you to do is take the next 15 seconds. And if you're at a -3, judgment free, or if you're at a 1, what could you do to move yourself just a little bit closer to 5? Maybe you need to tidy up your space. Maybe you need to stand or sit. Maybe you need to grab a bottle of water. Maybe you need to answer that last text message. Some people need to turn their phones on. Some need to turn it off. Some need to close the 17 tabs in the background like I had to do right before we started. But you decide for you how you want to personalize your learning environment. Take the next 15 seconds and do whatever it is that you need to do to get yourself more focused for learning. Go. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now I want you to rate yourself as you have taken the time to personalize your learning environment. What's your number now? Go ahead and type in your number or move your dot, the yellow dot on the interactive slides. You decide. Okay. Even if you're just a little bit closer to 5, as long as you do what you need to do, take the space you need to be well to move yourself forward. So stop number 1. And these stops are numbered so that you know where we are in the journey, how much we've learned together, and how far we have to go. And each stop is numbered that way so that there is a natural entry point in case anything pulls you away or your attention is diverted. You know that when we come to a stop, that's a great on-ramp, a place for you to jump back into the learning. So the first stop is data pictures. And I first wanted to just define what is a picture. And so I looked it up, and picture can be a verb or a noun. Picture as a verb, this is an action, something you do, is defined as to capture or create an image of a person or object or scene, or to visualize something. And so there is a picture on your screen of a person holding a blank piece of paper in front of their face with a question mark. And so if a picture is defined as to capture or create an image of a person or object or scene, or to visualize something, that blank page represents that the picture gets to be created by you. If picture is a noun, it is a representation of anything as a person, a landscape, a building upon a canvas, paper, or other surface by drawing, painting, printing, or photography. And that definition came from yourdictionary.com. And so it's to capture or create an image or represent something on canvas or paper. This is a picture. And so when we think about the word picture, I want you to think about what words stand out to you from that definition. You can type those in the chat or write on the interactive slides. It's up to you. So what words in the definition of picture stand out to you? Representation. Thank you, Jennifer. And make sure you click on everyone so that we all can see your answers, unless you just want to send it to the host and the panelists. Photography, information, capture, image, visualize, create, representation. That phrase, create an image, visualize, defined, create, capture a person. Heidi, that's exactly what stood out to me as well. That when we think about creating data pictures, we capture a person, only we capture them in numbers, in demographics, in statistics. We capture a person in that picture, in that visualization. We capture them upon a canvas or a report or a paper. This data picture is captured a moment in time. Well, I want to just share a data picture with you. And if you will, just take a look at the screen. And I'm going to turn on my pointers so that I can point you to what I'm looking at. So how are California's preschool inclusion rates trending? And so when we think about this picture, this data picture captured representing our learners with disabilities, inclusion rates were trending upwards from 2014 to 2016, but dropped significantly starting in 2017. And so if you look here at indicator 6A, the percentage of preschoolers with an IEP who receive the majority of special education services in a regular early childhood program, and you'll see as you follow, there's a decline and somewhat of a plateau, but still trending downward. And so less students with an IEP are receiving the majority of their special education services in a regular early childhood program. What is the picture that we're creating? What is the representation that we're capturing? And then indicator 6B, percentage of preschoolers with an IEP who attend a separate special education class, school, or residential facility. And you'll see the trend here through 2018. So how are California's preschool inclusion rates trending? And this was for new reporting methodology in 2019-20. And you'll see here that there was a phased in change to federal reporting methodology, removing 5-year-olds in kindergarten from indicator 6. And you'll see the trend. And also here. What is the picture? What is the story? What are we capturing? And then this is California's preschool inclusion rates compared to other large states. There's a data picture that's being captured here. And so think about it. If a picture is defined, or to picture is defined as to capture or create an image of a person, an object, a scene, or to visualize something, or it's a representation of anything, representation of a person on canvas, on paper, on surface by drawing, painting, printing, photography, what image has been captured or created for students with disabilities in California? Take a moment. that they do not belong. Thank you, Mary. Other responses, what image has been captured? They are separated. They are educated separately. They are outsiders. Fewer opportunities for them, that we don't have time to meet their needs, that they need additional support, that is overwhelming. We are flatlining, separate from the earliest years. All does not mean all, alone and overlooked. And so as we consider the image that has been captured, we find the story in our data, not just about the children, but the story about us and our decisions. What story is covered up in our early childhood data? And this is stop number 2. This is data pain. And so as we think about the story that is covered up in numbers and charts, as we uncover those, there are images that reveal real people, real children with real aspirations and real hopes. And so if we think about every child coming into early childhood settings as a story waiting to be written, their once upon a time begins when they enter this early childhood setting, and their happily ever after is looked at sometimes as far off and someone else's responsibility, when in actuality, the connector between once upon a time and they lived happily ever after comes with the decisions that you make in the early childhood setting. And so, what are the decisions and the choices and the biases that color that picture, that create this story? What are the conversations and traditions that ignore students with disabilities or students of color in their culture? What are the designs and the destinations that separate once upon a time from happily ever after because of what we decide, the destinations that we choose, the stereotypes that we operate from, the language that we use to address our students and their families, and the practices that we've held so tightly to that we are disrupted when we have to disrupt the inequality and the injustice that we are perpetuating. Once upon a time, and they lived happily ever after is largely up to what we do in the early years. And so, once upon a time segregation cannot lead to belonging in the happily ever after. And I'm going to pause there. That's a painful statement to take in, heavy as it is. Once upon a time segregation, that means that when we segregate early, it does not lead to belonging later. It does not lead to a fulfilling career for students with disabilities later. It does not lead to inclusion at a later point. Once upon a time, segregation becomes segregation over and over again. And the story that we're writing for our early childhood learners, our children of color, our children with disabilities, is that we're making decisions to segregate at higher rates over and over again, and then hoping that someone else makes this happily ever after a reality. Our decisions cause pain. And as we look at the data, we have to ask ourselves, does that data hurt enough for us to change our practices? And so I just want to share some data with you, and the sources are at the bottom of each slide. But the percentage of youth with autism that expect to have a job, you see that it is close to, it's in the 90s, 94%. Percentage of youth with intellectual disabilities that expect to have a job was 93%, very closely behind. But here are some outcome data. The percentage of adults with the intellectual disability that have a paid job in the community, 17%. I want you to just pause and take that data in. How about lifelong learning? The percentage of youth with autism that expect to obtain post-secondary education is 74%. Percentage of youth with intellectual disability that expect to obtain post-secondary education, close to 50%. And then the percentage of adults with intellectual disability that complete a program with a certificate or a degree, 23%. And so their destination that they're choosing for themselves and the actual outcomes are so vastly different. And so about 80% of youth with autism expect to live on their own. About I think there's 73% of youth with intellectual disability expect to live on their own, but only 23% of adults with intellectual disabilities live independently or semi-independently. What decisions are we making in early childhood that are divorcing their happily ever after from the once upon a time? And so I want you to pause just a moment, and I'll give you 2 minutes for yourself to think about what picture are we capturing? And this is stop 3 in data pain, to give ourselves a chance to sit with the heaviness of the numbers that we just encountered, both at the early childhood rates and at the post-secondary outcomes. What picture are we capturing? How is the data reflecting back to us the impact of our beliefs, our biases, our decisions? Do we realize the pain of the decisions we make? And does the pain hurt enough for us to change? Take 2 minutes to reflect. Take 2 minutes to think about your own practices, maybe the practices that are commonplace in the places where you serve. Take 2 minutes just to see the picture and reflect. You can either type in the chat or on the interactive slides, or just take time to think, but I'll start my timer and just give 2 minutes. About 40 seconds remaining. Thank you for typing in the chat. About 40 seconds. About 10 seconds. So much in the chat as we sit with the pain, and even in places where there is full inclusion, our goal is to have full belonging, that every learner feels like they belong, and not just because they're present, but because the supports are there and the expectations are there and the resources are there for every student to have what they need. And as we sit with this pain, there is a temptation to lean toward this hopelessness. But as we journey through these 4 sessions together, I am hopeful that at the early childhood level, we can take a look at practices that disrupt inequity, practices that disrupt injustice, practices that push systems to evaluate where we are and where we hope to go and how we can get every learner there. And so until all means all, in the sense that all learners feel like they belong because they do, then we will have work to do. And so I'm so grateful that we get to go on this journey together. And so that last question, every time the pain feels too great, every time you get overwhelmed, every time you feel like I have no idea if this is a reality, I want you to Lean into that question. Does the pain hurt enough for us to change? And when it's not a change that we need to make personally, does the pain hurt enough for us to fight for every piece of the organization to change until we realize true belonging and inclusion for all learners? Does it hurt? Does it hurt enough for us to change? And so, as you are pausing to reflect, who is feeling the pain? Where does it hurt the most? And what can I do differently in early childhood to change the outcomes? This is where it's personal. This is where it comes into practice. And this is where it has to be pushed. And so who, where, and what for yourself personally, for your organization? Who is feeling the pain? And we saw those post-secondary outcomes that start in the early childhood setting. Where does it hurt the most? Well, we see that some districts are a little bit farther ahead on their inclusion journey than others, that some of us in our practices and our beliefs are a little bit farther ahead. And so where is the pain? That's where we need to be paying attention. And before we treat the symptoms, we have to know the cause. We have to know why these numbers persist and why the trends are as they do. And as we allow the numbers and the charts to bring us back to faces and experience and pictures and people, we have to think about what can I do differently in early childhood to change outcomes. I was reading What Happened to You by Bruce Perry, and he talks a lot about early childhood settings. And he said that when children don't feel respected by the decisions of, he said, parents, and I also added trusted adults, then their beliefs about how they are valued are crushed. And so as we journey through these 4 sessions, I want you to take that last question with you from each session. What can I do differently in early childhood to change the outcomes? Thomas Murray said, a key to building culture is having empathy for the hidden stories inside of others. Can we build empathy for an experience that may have never been our own? Can we value each learner to see themselves as valued members of the community? And not just with our words, but with our intent, our impact, our actions, our designs, our decisions. And so from that awareness, I like to say that where awareness meets decision is where there is power. And so many of us as educators, sometimes because we're in systems, feel like we are powerless. But where we have this awareness, where we know or where we think we know, and we make a decision for someone else, that is a place where power lives. And I want to just dig into data power. This is stop number 4, the problem of power. We have to think about that. So being in powerful positions actually changes the brain. And if you're in education, whether you are a coordinator, a teacher, OT, PT, you have power, that there is awarenesses that you use to make decisions for others. And when we're in those powerful positions and we're used to being in those powerful positions all the time, then what happens to the brain is that we're more impulsive, that we're less risk aware, and we're less able to see others' point of view. And that's from an article in Business Insider that talks about the brain damage that power causes, but really it talks about the changes in the brain. And so think about it. If you're making decisions for learners, then you're used to making those decisions. You have a place of power in their lives. And with this power, because you're used to making decisions for others, we can become more impulsive, less aware of the risk we're taking for them, and then not able to see others' point of view. And I want you to think about that post-secondary outcome data, where there are learners who are expecting to live independently, to work on their own, and yet someone is making decisions for them that they're constantly segregated, constantly pushed to the side, constantly educated in spaces that are not regular ed, so they don't get to work with their peers, and their peers don't get the benefit of spending time with them and learning from their differences. And I want you to take a look at the dancer on the screen who has lowered themselves because they have the strength to do so. The dancer is in almost like a push-up position, but on one knee, and the other leg is lifted into the air. And from that lowered viewpoint, this is a position of power, but the dancer is less able to see others' point of view, and that leads to a reliance on stereotypes. And so when you're in this position of power and less able to see or experience what other people want or what they think, but in a position of power with limited vision, that equals stereotype threat, where we literally shape learners into the stereotype that we have for them, and they believe it. It is a very dangerous place with power to use a limited viewpoint with the power that we have, and it equals stereotype threat. And we'll talk more about that as these sessions open up. And so in my book, Anti-Racism and Universal Design for Learning, I talk about Lisa Delpit's article. She wrote an article in 1988 talking about issues of power in the classroom. In my book, I talk about honor in the classroom. And so how do we combat this power culture? Is by honoring others. And so Lisa Delpit said that there are issues of power enacted in the classroom, and there are codes or rules that create this culture of power. And I would like to propose that we begin to create cultures of honor. Honor recognizes that the power structure that exists both past and present, but honor is acknowledging the intent and actions of abolishing the limitations of the power structure at hand. And so what does honor look like? So maybe it's in the early childhood setting, giving learners choices for how they will be welcomed. Maybe they can point to a fist bump or an elbow bump or a toe tap and decide how they want to be welcomed. The first thing they do each day is make a decision for themselves, that no one is going to decide that they can't make a decision, or they don't know, or they'll just copy off of the one in front of them. But each day they're empowered to choose for themselves how they are welcome. This is honor in action. This is taking the power to say, I greet all my students the same way, and relinquishing that power to honor each learner to say, you have a choice. How would you like to be welcomed? Or maybe you skip the welcome and walk right past, and you don't have to choose any of those. Maybe asking learners what songs or routines they enjoy most to find out how to build for them and how to design for them. And even at ages 3 and 4 and 5, that they have this sense that they can make decisions for themselves. This is honor in the classroom. And so Lisa Delpit goes on to say the rules of the culture of power are a reflection of the rules of the culture that has the power. And being told the rules of the culture makes acquiring power easier for those who are not in the culture of power. And so honor is empowering each member of the learning community daily, that we will design our structures and supports and choices to empower the learners to make decisions for themselves. That invites members of the learning community into positions of power, authority, and decision-making. Even in the early childhood setting, if that means taking myself out of power, to give them practice on how to make decisions for themselves. And so seating choices, giving learners space to choose the kind of seat that works for them. Often we'll have carpet time, and carpet time can be intimidating. It can be difficult for learners, but if there's seating choices and they can all bring the type of seat that they would like to sit in to the carpet, that gives them power. How do they want to participate? With centers, maybe visually, maybe with listening to something, but everyone doesn't have to do the same thing, but each learner has a little tasting of what it is that they like best. And then they get to experience multiple ways to participate. And homework and extension activities have to honor parents where they are, honor families where they are, meaning that we structure our designs and supports to meet the needs of families as we meet the needs of learners. This is respectful. This is honor in action. And last but not least, those with power are least aware or least willing to acknowledge that this power exists. Honor creates opportunities for members of the learning community to make powerful decisions that govern their outcomes. And that means that learners get to choose the assignments that they try, that there's flexibility in how they attempt the assignment, and that we communicate with families in a number of ways. So maybe instead of just sending homework home, that's a power move. We send home a video, we send home print, We send home activities and give them choices on what they would like to do and how they would like to do it. That's a respectful practice. That is honor and action. And we'll talk more about that in our session on family. So Oprah Winfrey shares in the book, What Happened to You? She says, when you've been groomed to be compliant, confrontation in any form is uncomfortable because you were never taught that you have the right to say no. The sense that you are deserving enough to set your own boundaries has been stolen from you. Far too many early childhood settings are grooming grounds for compliance, teaching how to follow directions only. And so, what if in designing inclusive preschools, we freed learners up to make decisions for themselves? We gave them practice on trying new things and supporting them to learn how they learn best early. And then maybe instead of segregating those who don't comply with our power, we invite all children to learn who they are and how we can best build community together. What if? Data honor is stop 4. Every journey of healing begins with a wound. Honor is found in systems that acknowledge the wounds caused by its own failures and intentionally abolish and rebuild for healing and health for all. We get to design inclusive preschools because we've experienced the wound. We know where we've fallen short. We see the divorce between Once Upon a Time and Happily Ever After. And we, those of us who are here today, get to make intentional decisions on how do we begin healing and health? What do we need to abolish in order to rebuild in the early childhood setting? This is the wheel of power and privilege. And I love this image. It was created by Sylvia Duckworth, and I follow her on Instagram. She always has amazing equity-centered graphics. And so if you look here, this is the wheel of power and privilege. I want you to think about early childhood settings. School as an institution was created for the culture of power, which white with formal education, able-bodied, heterosexual, neurotypical, robust mental health, slim body size, owns property, rich, speaks English, cisgender men who are citizens of the United States. Preschools will follow the same pattern of power and privilege unless we design differently, unless we challenge the traditions of separating the room by boys and girls, unless we look at the practices that say that white culture is valued, that there's only one size that fits in our desk. We have to look at our customs and our lessons to begin to design so that every learner, whether on the fringes or on the borders, is pulled into that power seat to make decisions for themselves and set culture for us as a community. Power plus limited vision is stereotype threat. Power plus prejudice equals racism and ableism, but power plus honor equals real community. Power plus honor is a dance that lifts all of us. And when we bring the power that we have and lay it down to honor every learner in the classroom, then it causes all of us to rise together to heights that we didn't even think that we could. And so what are we going to do? As we design inclusive preschool, as you go back to your different settings, your different roles, your different schools, I want to just leave you with 6 questions to begin our series, to begin our journey together. So what decisions are you making about learners? Think about it. And how will you challenge those assumptions? The second question is, what decisions are you making for learners? And how will you entrust more decision-making power to learners in your design? And we're going to talk about what that design can look like. What decisions are you keeping from learners? And how will you evaluate your design to increase honoring learners by inviting their power to the early childhood setting? What barriers are you designing for or designing to eliminate in secret? And how will you purposefully increase awareness of systemic barriers for learners? In what areas are learners least aware of your decisions? And how will you increase learners' awareness and involvement in your decision-making process? Have you examined your own awareness of power and privilege in your design? And how will you continue the self-work to lead the work of co-creating communities of honor? I want you to think about those questions. Type into the chat the question that you're willing to grapple with this in the next few days as we come back. So just type the question that is resonating most deeply with you. Thank you, Jennifer. These questions will be foundational for us as we move forward into the how, as we design to honor our learners. And so at the beginning of the session, I shared that you learn so much more when you're free to express your learning in the way that makes sense and is not contrary to who you are. And when we think about our learners with disabilities, when we think about those data pictures that we saw, excluded, pushed out, marginalized, removed, that we don't have time for them, that we don't want them here, and all of those stories that contradict that learning cannot be safe for them. And so we have to realize that in our freedom to make decisions, that we restrict the freedom of learners who need us to invite their humanity to our learning environments. And so I want you to pause and reflect again. And this is a 2-minute video that I'll share. And is every identity welcome in your classroom? Does every learner know who they are as a learner? Are you helping them to get there? And have you asked learners what they need? And so I'm going to share this video. Juliet or Kristen or Janelle, you have to let me know if you can hear it, and then I'll reshare if we can. So this is from the Inclusion Collaborative from Santa Clara County in California. But I just want you to take a look at this setting as you ponder the questions for yourself. Can you hear?
We can see it, but not hear it yet.
Say it again, Juliet.
This is Kristen. We can see it, but can't hear it yet.
Okay, I'm going to stop share and reshare and click the little buttons that give us sound. Thank you for your patience. And here we go.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. Look at this. Wow. Yeah, come on, Ken. Ken, you ever turn? Ken, it's okay. Thank you for waiting, Alexander. Alexander's back to reading.
Can you get a little bit clear? No, I can stay there. Move on.
Get that, go. Go. That's not over there.
Yeah, Paxson. Would you like to help them?
Yeah.
Go help them.
Oh, teamwork.
Yeah, teamwork, right. Osman is right, teamwork.
Oh, yay.
Thank you for helping. You're such a good helper.
So the geese, they have also a what? The beak.
And I wanted to share that video with you. So as you pause and reflect, you can think about if every identity is welcome in your classroom. Every identity. I want you to think about, does every learner know who they are as a learner? Are they in the process of discovering themselves, or are they just complying with what you've asked them to do? Have you asked learners what they need? Have you listened? And can they see their answer in your design? We'll talk more about what that looks like in the next sections. So as we, there's a document that's in your resources for today called Walking Up the Pyramid as we return to teaching. And the first level of the pyramid is self-care. And so one part of self-care that I really wanted to point out to you is that in order to take care of children, you have to take care of you. And self-care is a part of it, but also self-awareness and self-reflection and self-leadership. And so as we think about these biases and traditions and customs that we hold on to, beginning the self-work to see where injustice is perpetuated in my care is self-care as you think about the care that you give to others. So starting with you, who are you as a teacher? Are you reflecting on what you know and what you don't know, what you've asked, maybe what you haven't asked? Have you looked at yourself to be more self-aware of where you can grow and learn? And when you reflect, are you stepping into that self-leadership, not waiting on someone else to tell you where the injustices are and what needs to change, but making those decisions first for yourself? And so our session goals were to walk through some key data points, to examine the connection between early segregation and post-secondary outcomes, to reflect on the impact of honor, empower, and then to identify practices to disrupt perpetuating educational injustice. We're just getting started, but I want to take you back to the beginning of the session. What image has been captured or created for students with disabilities in California? I want you to think about the picture that we give to them, the picture that we show them of themselves, of what we believe they can do or cannot do, or the value that we feel that they either have or don't have in our educational settings. What representation are we projecting back to them with our decisions and our design and our choices and our structures? Is it one of power where we make all the decisions, or is it honor where we are teaching them to make decisions for themselves? Once upon a time and happily ever after cannot be pushed apart by once upon a time and happily ever after only meet when we include to the point of belonging. Segregation does not lead to belonging. And so if we want belonging and inclusion, then there once upon a time has to begin in the early childhood settings. Less segregation, less separation, less removal, and more inclusion that leads to the happily ever after of belonging, of productive citizenry, of really living the life that they desire for themselves. And it starts with us. I want you to think about that wheel of power and privilege. And does your design disrupt this power and privilege, or does it perpetuate it? And as we journey through the next 3 sessions, we'll be able to jump into that a little deeper. So how will you create happily ever after for your learners starting today? How will you create happily ever after for your learners starting today? How in your early childhood settings will you prepare them for the independence that they want so desperately in their job, in their post-secondary outcomes, in their living arrangements? And so as you think about that happily ever after, I want you to write in 1 minute the most important thing from today's session. Just take a moment and put the most important thing in the chat. And if you have questions, you can put those right in the Q&A. So take a minute to reflect, and then we'll jump into questions. About 30 seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to jump into questions at this time. I just want to thank you all for your time today. If you are watching the recording, we thank you for joining us and hope that you were able to participate with us fully. I would love to continue the conversation. You can follow me on Twitter or on Facebook at Fritztesha, FRITZTESHA, or you can join my email list on buildingblocksofbrilliance.com. We can change this. I saw that in the chat. We can make a difference. And so this is just the beginning of our 4-part series. We have 3 more where we jump into some practical application of the universal design for learning and anti-racism, and then bring that back to building inclusive preschool. So excited for our next session on Thursday, and would love to extend the conversation. So at this time, Juliet, Kristen, Janelle, did you see any questions that we can answer?
Hi, I haven't seen any pop up, just lots of thank yous in the chat that it was a fantastic workshop training, some really incredible insights as always. We knew you always deliver. So we thank you so much for joining us. For everyone on the line, again, thank you so much for joining us for part 1 of this series. And we look forward to seeing you again on this Thursday, December 9th from 3 to 4. And please follow Andratesha on Twitter and keep this conversation going. So however we can support you in your work, reach out to us here in Supporting Inclusive Practices at sipinclusion.org as well. We're here in this work together because we can change this. So thank you again so much. And we'll hang on just for a couple minutes, any last minute questions, but I'm not seeing anything. Janelle, Juliet, do you see anything in the chat that I might be missing?
Don't see anything.
Great. So for those of you still on the line, we did record this and the session will be posted to the Padlet. So we'll be using the Padlet throughout this series. So don't lose that link, but we will share that again with you at the next session. So
and then there's a really quick question about registration. If you registered for this session, then you automatically are registered for all 4 sessions. So same Zoom link. We will see you Thursday at 3 o'clock.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andratesha. Incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andratesha.
Thank you. This is great. See you all Thursday.